Vincenzo'S Go Crypto Investing. Also, Michigan Snow Forecast Gold Standard here on Facebook and Vincenzo'S Go Crypto Investing on YouTube. We can see in this Lake Mead update, Lake Mead is continuing to rise here as we told you it would. If you remember our first few videos that we started making on Lake Mead back in here, we were telling you that this season the water level was going to surpass, if we put 2022, 2019, 2018, we told you by the end of the year, usually the water levels as you get into May and June start to go down, right? Because it starts to get dry and the snow is pretty much gone. We were telling you, if you look at the videos back in May or March, that the water levels would continue to rise in May, June, July, and even into August. And we were thinking we could even get all the way up into here with our water level, right? That we were going to at least come in, and it was going to continue when the normal pattern is for the water level to come into the spring, start to come up, and as we get into the spring and summer, the water level starts to go back down and then levels off until the next year, right? As you can see right here, see how it levels off in July, later July, August, September, and October, we level off with the water, right? Until we get into the wintertime season in the late fall and November, going into December, then the water starts to rise again as we get some precipitation that moves into there. But this year, we're continuing to rise, right? And that's a very, very positive sign. And I think we're going to gain another 20 or 30 feet. I think we're going to end up somewhere up into here, maybe even a little bit higher, because there's still a lot of snow that must melt in the Pacific Northwest after 3 consecutive La Niñas that took place out here. You can see the current water level of 1,054 feet and 50 cents, right? And a change from yesterday of up 0.01 feet. You can see down here the change since yesterday, right? So that's what we're looking at there. The winter pool, 915 feet. So that's pretty good there. And the big changes that we're going to be having coming up now is we're going to have a La Nina coming up, or an El Nino coming up after 3 consecutive La Ninas. And all that means is we have multiple things that we look for, and this is for my people out in Michigan. When people ask what the winter is going to be like in Michigan, there's 3 big areas that you look at. The PDO, which is right here, the sea surface temperatures that stretch from Russia along the coast to Alaska and down the west coast, northwest Canada, down Washington, Oregon, California, and down into the Mexican coast, and then it starts to stretch back out towards Hawaii, right? That's an area number 1. If it's a warm PDO, or in this case, you can see it's a cold PDO, it's got cold sea surface temperatures along the water in a horseshoe or a hook shaped, right? And then it's got an area of above normal temperatures centered out in the central Pacific, and then stretching back west towards the coast of Russia and China, back out over there, right? And so that's area number 1. Depending on what phase that's in the wintertime, has a direct correlation to what's going on in North America, right? And then you have area number 2, which is the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index. Is it an El Nino or La Nina? And in this case right there, this is a cold PDO look where you have cold sea surface temperatures over here, right? See these cold sea surface temperatures? Let's get a different color, green. That cold sea surface temperature there. Then you have a El Nino or a La Nina where you have cold sea surface temperatures out in the central Pacific stretching back towards South America, right? So there's number 2. Those are 2 things, 2 big areas. Now, if you have an El Nino here, this area would be warm. It would be red there, right? And then up here with the PDO, it's just a flip. If you have a warm PDO, this instead of being blue would be green, or instead of being blue would be red, and this instead of being red would be blue. It would just be flipped, right? The same thing if this was an El Nino, this area would be red instead of blue. And then you have the MJO, which is calculated in here in the wintertime. This is your MJO region, and depending on where the upward motion, the vertical velocity, and the storms are taking place in layman's terms, where they're storms. Are the storms clustered here? Are they clustered here? Are they clustered here? Are they clustered here? Or are they clustered here is the MJO. And depending on where the storms are clustered, directly affects the pattern here. And if you're in Michigan, you're saying, well, what are we looking for in the winter time to get a good winter? Well, DMJO has to be in certain phases, and then you look for sea surface temperatures. You look for warm water in that area. You want that to be above normal, right? Especially up here in Alaska at the coast. If you can get a big blob of above normal water temperatures there, that promotes ridging, because then you're going to have cooler sea surface temperatures back here, right? And this would promote a big ridge up in Alaska. And what does that do when you promote a big ridge up in Alaska and down the west coast? The trade winds are coming off the continent down the plains into the northeast, providing below normal temperatures, and it's blocking the Pacific air from coming in. So the Pacific air on the coast, the winds are going out off, they're going out to sea, or they're blowing away from land and keeping the warmer, relatively speaking, Pacific air out into the ocean, and it's allowing the trade winds to come in off the Arctic and the continent and drain in cold air into North America. Now, if you don't have a big warm patch up here like last winter or the winter before, you get cooler sea surface temperatures up in this area. It promotes a trough up in here in Alaska where you get cold air. Like this year, you get a big trough coming down the west coast, cold air getting into Washington and Oregon and California, and then you get the Pacific jet stream crashing into it, bringing in warm Pacific air in, right? And the trade winds are coming in off the Pacific up into the central part of the plains into the northeast, and that's a very, very warm pattern, right? Where the trade winds are coming in like this, you get trough of low pressure on the west coast, and you get the cold air coming down the west coast, and then the winds, the primary winds aloft and at the surface coming in out of the Pacific Ocean. That is a mild air. Pacific air is mild, and when Pacific air pushes its way in the west coast, it comes up and over the Rockies and it lifts, and as it comes down the Rockies and sinks, it modifies even more. So what's below normal out here is 15 or 20 degrees above normal when you get out into the plains, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, right? Like we had this winter, where primarily in here you were above normal, and primarily in here you were below normal. And why were you below normal primarily in there? Because the storm track was there. You had a big trough in there, right? So that's what we're looking at for the Lake Mead update, and some of the things, if you're watching from Michigan, what we're looking for. If you want a cold, snowy winter here, what we'd like to see, if we get the El Nino, we would like to see it a little bit cooler waters here. And then we would like to see, we'll make this a cooler color, we would like to see the El Nino to be cooler here in Nino 1, 2, and warmer out here, more of a centrally based. If you get the warmest water compared to normal in the El Nino in December, January, February out in this green box, and even though it's above normal over here in Nino 1, and then this would be Nino 2, and then Nino 3 is right there. If this is closer to normal than out here, and this is more above normal out here, and this is noticeably less warm over here, that is a bullish signal and called the Modoki El Nino, right? And that promotes it to be colder in the Great Lakes on an El Nino, right? So that would be what we're looking for if on an El Nino, right? If to get just a El Nino based Southern Oscillation Index, if we're just taking that in by itself, we would want a centrally based El Nino where the warmest water is compared to normal during the El Nino out here in the Central Pacific, and it gets closer to normal and not as warm over here, Nino 1, 2, and even sneaking out to Nino 3, which is out here. This would be Nino 3, right? So that's what we'd be looking at, and then we would like to see a warm pool up here.